This morning we served the Rexburg Police Department and the Fremont County Sheriff's Office and the FBI served a search warrant in the 200 block of 1900 East here in Fremont County, also known as Chad Daybell's residence. Throughout the investigation, detectives and investigators have recovered what's believed to be human remains that have not been identified at this time. We are not going to answer any questions at this time in regards to any of the further of the investigation until we have more details.
Absolutely devastating news tonight, and you know, people are putting two and two together. No one's been positively identified yet, but we know where we are tonight in this case. Let's bring everyone in, and we'll begin with Chanley. Chanley, this is a case that so complicated, yet starts with JJ and Tylee. They've been missing since September, and now for the first time there's some level of indication as to what may have happened to these two children.
Yeah, and an unfortunate one. We were all for months and months with high hopes that they would be found or located alive. Now, if the human remains found today turn out to be one of the kids or both or whatever it may be, what an unfortunate situation. That means charges pending now for Chad Daybell. He's being held at the Fremont County Jail there in Idaho, and they aren't announcing the charges, but just saying it's a felony. He's being held with no bond. And of course, Lori Vallow already in Madison County Jail, the neighboring county, facing 5 different counts, including 2 felonies. We can expect that possibly those would be modified or upgraded or changed in any way. So lots of huge developments today in this saga.
Yeah, this is difficult. You know, Ted, we look at this many different ways, right? We're covering a search for children. Now we're covering a criminal investigation. But at the heart of all this, you know, you think about Larry and Kay Woodcock, JJ's grandparents. You know, but for them, there never even would have been a search for these children. And, you know, I can't imagine what they're going through tonight. It's got to be a mixture of emotions.
Yeah, and they have said that if this was the news, they wanted it. So on the positive side, it sounds like the waiting may be over, depending on what comes up with the remains. If it is JJ, if it is Tylee, both, we don't know. What we do know is a search warrant was executed, and they know the backstory to it, because this was just not a willy-nilly search. It was executed at 7 a.m. and by late morning, early afternoon, they're already having a press conference saying that human remains were located. They knew where they were going to dig, and they found remains, which is good for the investigation, because to me, it sounds like they know the backstory. They know more information. They know exactly where to go. Hopefully, this means this is all going to crumble down between Chad Daybell and Lori Daybell. Hopefully, the Woodcocks will get some answers.
Yeah, Julie, I think Ted is right on here. You don't just randomly, and we're looking at this chopper video, you know, it's a lot of property you're looking at, but they knew exactly where to go. It seems like they found some evidence somewhere that led them to this.
Oh, yes. Surprise, surprise for Chad Daybell. Mr. Doomsday got some company at 7 a.m. this morning. Lots of FBI agents just raiding that property. And like we've been saying in the weeks and months we've been discussing this case, Vinny, investigators are always several steps ahead than they let everybody know. And for good reason. For good reason. This guy probably hadn't had his breakfast yet. And all of a sudden, investigators are swarming his property. Good on them for taking their time. And remember, there was a search of his property, I believe, in January. So we're going back several months. They recovered several different pieces of evidence, much of which has not been disclosed to the public, just like the contents of this search warrant today are not being disclosed. It's all under seal. But who knows if they recovered something in that search that was then used to get them to where they are today. Or perhaps somebody spoke. We know they've been doing lots and lots of interviews, lots of people connected to Cult Mom and Mr. Doomsday. Perhaps somebody spoke up. And I'm wondering now, Vinny, if Mr. Doomsday is going to do some talking now that he is in custody.
Absolutely. Let's go to Lauren Steinbrecher, who joins us, reporter for our affiliate Fox 13 KSTU. She's on the ground in East Idaho tonight. Lauren, let me begin with where you are. So where are you in relation to where Chad Daybell's home is, and what can you describe for us about the area where you are?
Yeah, so where we're at, and this honestly perfectly exemplifies the area we're in, is across a farm field from Chad Daybell's home. We can zoom way in to his house to actually show you where investigators are set up outside this evening. We've been watching them put out light stands to, I guess, light up the yard once it starts getting dark here. But this is an extremely rural area right now with, houses that are few and far between. They really only have a few neighbors and some farm fields. But that's about as close as we've been able to get. Investigators have really been keeping people far away so we can't see what's going on unless, of course, we're up in the air. So that's what we're seeing out here is, and of course, this has all been going on outside, is these tents that have been up, lights that have been going up. That's where we believe that those remains were found in the yard.
If they're bringing in lights, it looks like it's going to be a while. How long do we expect police to be out there processing and doing the search that they're doing right now?
All night, I would say, as you guys were mentioning, 7 a.m. is when they showed up here this morning. By 11:30 is when they took Chad into custody. And now we have them setting up lights in the yard, which means once it gets dark here at, around 9 o'clock p.m., they're still going to be out here going over his property. And they say they're staying out here because they want to continue to make sure that they're not missing anything in this search, any other potential evidence that they may need to collect. So staying out here all night. And of course, when you have something like human remains found, that's something that's going to be hours and hours of work.
Do we know who was living in the house at the time? Is that clear yet? Because to do a search, right, you got to get the people out of the house. Do we have any indication one way or the other whether or not Chad was in there and anyone else happened to be living in that home?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we actually know. I was up here in January when they served that first search warrant. I actually knocked on the house myself, and his kids are living at the home. They have several children, and some of them, from my understanding, were living at the home. That's who answered the door. Once Chad got back from Hawaii, from what we had heard from people in the area who saw his home, is that he eventually ended up back at home. A woman we spoke with today said she drove by his home every single day. Sometimes she would see him out in the front yard. So he was definitely at the home. Sounds like his children were living at the home. Not sure who was at home this morning when police arrived, but we know that Chad was taken into custody about a mile away from his house.
And you mentioned children. We've been covering the story for several months now, and that's the one part of the story that we really haven't heard much about. Chad Daybell's, I guess, original family that he had with Tammy. How many children does he have, and what are their ages? Do we know?
Yeah, so he has 5 children. A lot of them are in their early 20s. I think one maybe in late teens serving a mission. Men and women. Some of them have young children themselves. I have knocked on a couple of doors of where they live because there's another family that lives in this area, one of his daughters, and they have not wanted to speak at all. In fact, law enforcement had told me early on that they weren't even really cooperative with law enforcement. I think that may have changed as time went on, but yeah, they've really kind of backed off and stayed silent in all of this.
As we look at that, the shots from the air, the video from the air, and it looks like there's several different dig sites. Any indication one way or the other from investigators about the remains that they have found, whether it's in one location, several locations, and any specifics at all today?
Yeah, I mean, that's obviously a huge question. And, the remains, if we're talking about potentially remains of JJ and Tylee, is it potentially JJ, potentially Tylee, potentially both? We're not sure. And law enforcement wouldn't say as far as what exactly they've recovered, except to say unidentified remains. So we're not sure, what exactly that looks like, why they're digging in several different spots, obviously hoping to find that out.
And so they're processing what's going on outside. Any indication that they're doing anything inside the home as well?
I'm not sure about inside. I haven't really heard a lot about inside. From what we've seen in the air and kind of zooming in on some of that footage, a lot of the law enforcement vehicles that are here, a lot of the equipment that is here, like we've seen backhoes and things like that, have pretty much been geared toward outside. And what we've seen is investigators all over the yard. So it really seems like outside is the focus. You know, of course, when they were here in January, they were inside the home. They weren't really outside as much. So now it's completely flip-flopped. It's all been a focus outside.
All right, and Lauren, before we have to let you go, do we know what's next? Have they said, okay, we're going to speak again, or we're going to make another announcement at another point, or we'll give you more information about what's going on?
They haven't said that quite yet. We just know that they are questioning Chad Daybell right now. They have him in custody, and they did say that charges could be pending from what they found out here today. So we're hoping to find out more information on what those charges would look like. You know, is Chad Daybell officially going to jail? Hopefully that information will be forthcoming very soon.
Lauren Steinbrecher joining us from our affiliate Fox 13, actually from Salt Lake City, Utah, traveling out there to Idaho. Lauren, thank you so much for the information. Really do appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem.
All right, folks, when we come back, we've got a lot to go through. We're going to bring back in our team of legal journalists and go through what we are learning, what is unraveling tonight. Again, the huge headline: human remains found in the backyard of Chad Daybell. Chad Daybell in custody tonight, being questioned.